So for this particular session, I was asked to share part of our market intelligence on student housing and micro-living in order to answer a question or bring a bit more light on the question, where is the growth, where to invest, where are the opportunities. A bit about student marketing so that you know what angle I will take. We are a market research and market intelligence firm for student housing and micro-living. We are a corporate member of the United Nations, as well as SOMAR, which is the top market research association in the world. So on the highest level possible, we conduct the research. Some of our clients you can see over there. The typical sign of what we do or what kind of intelligence we take is that we do primary research, field research on the ground level. So we interview students, we interview university representatives, landlords. So we have a primary, first-hand, hard-to-get data that we will partially present today. So some basic facts. Student housing asset class is part of alternative asset classes, which in the UK represent 17% of the total completed transactions. In a previously measured period, we have totally 8 million internationally mobile students globally that go for education abroad. We have over 4,500 purpose-built student accommodation establishments in the 50 most popular European cities alone, and over 700,000 beds in these top 50 European university cities. In total, close to 15 billion global investment in the sector in 2015, which was sort of a golden year for the asset class. First, student housing usage per nationality by domestic students or domestically mobile students. As you can see, this is only selection of the nationalities that are particularly of the interest of the coming month. And you can see that predominantly Eastern and Northern Europe domestic students use structured purpose-built student accommodation more so than Southern Europe and West Europe. So this is in general the scope. The other thing is that the number of domestic students is decreasing, so the demographic is not particularly fortunate. So domestic students represent only limited opportunity for the future over the next 5 years. On the other hand, international students, number of the international tertiary students in last 10 years, you can see over here, which our team broke down to 4 categories: UK, France, Germany, and other continental Europe. And as we can see, the continental Europe as a bunch of countries, smaller countries, is growing faster than any other country. So is France, so is Germany as a standalone country, excluded from that rest of continental Europe. And France is sort of growing, but slightly, but there are some new plans to revive this trajectory. What is probably the most important message from this slide is that the UK is not growing that much as the other continental countries, and represents a limited opportunity for the future also because of Brexit and net migration argument that is going on, which hinders the overall growth. So in general, the international students grow at the angle of 3.9%. More important message, the growth is resilient to economic downturn, so education abroad is no longer regarded as a luxury good for parents in China, Vietnam, or India, but they continue to invest in difficult times as well. The kids are usually children from ultra-rich or upper-middle-class families, so they usually opt for quality, which is positive news for structured student housing investments. And these international students have higher usage of structured student housing, a much higher usage of structured housing than domestic students. So international students in general represents an interesting opportunity in the future, be it for investors or university themselves. Therefore, we can see some predictions. This is a combination of a mathematical prediction and reflection of political circumstances in particular countries. plus all the investments of destinations to get more international students. So they are national plans and strategic plans which drive the demand to particular destinations. So when we reflected on all these factors, you can see that the rest of Europe is set to grow much more than all other three regions. UK is plateauing, Germany growing, France, if they don't kick off the new plan, they will also be similar performance as for international students as the UK, but it is very likely that this will grow. So in general, we will have 34,000 more international students in continental Europe by 2020. So that is a new opportunity on top of what we have already now. And this is topped up with the number of international students in short-term programs, as you can see. So this is a trajectory for the two major short-term programs, which is Erasmus and US study abroad. So United States 2 years ago announced to double the number of American students to study abroad for a semester or so. And so it should go from 250,000 to 500,000. Europe represents 55% of those students as a destination. So we can expect that it will go from 150 to roughly 300,000, plus the Erasmus students and the funds from EU means that we will have another 310,000 more short-term exchange students by 2020. Altogether, we talk about 640,000 new international students in Europe. So this is what destinations do. They spotted the opportunity to have more international students who bring revenues to the universities, to student housing, to the community. So it's an immediate economic footprint, and then roughly 30 to 40% of them want to stay, become a talent for the city, fill the gap of jobs, and then become citizens and long-term taxpayers. A huge benefit now and in the future for the city. So now roughly 40 destinations are already active with their strategic plans, trade missions, fan tours, and other marketing activities to attract more students, with roughly 2 million euros per annum budget to be spent on it. So there is an active budget behind it. And student housing is becoming an integral part of the value proposition. So, for example, it's a bit outside of Europe, but when we had the conversation with Australia, they set a new target last year, this time, to go from 660,000 to 720,000 students by 2025, sorry. And the first question was we have to have a structured student accommodation supplies, otherwise we will not be able to attract students, or we will have too much public resistance if the students live outside of structured accommodation. So before setting marketing activities to reach the goal, they're setting the deal with student housing operators or investors. And this way student housing is necessary for further increases, otherwise they would not be able to reach the goals. So out of all the factors, when we did the analysis for this particular location, so what are the top European countries for student housing investment? And we factored in the criteria that you can see on the right, on the left, sorry. So demand levels, growth rates, political circumstances, competition, and market size. So the dark blue are the countries that we believe, based on these factors, offer the best opportunity in months and years to come. The light blue are the ones that represents limited opportunity. So not no opportunity, but limited. Or it's because of the political development or size of the market, but most importantly, it's the supply. So when we look at Prague, Lisbon, or Scandinavian countries, the supply is really relatively high or higher than in other countries, so there is sort of limited opportunity there. Where are the students coming from? We track the mobility from each source country to destination, as well as from a particular city in India or China, so we know where the students are coming from. And we can see that the major senders are China, India for Europe, Germany, France, Nigeria, etc. The highest growth is from Asia. It's double digit still, even though it slowed down a little bit, especially in China. But we can we can expect the long haul students in Europe increasingly more so. Means for all of us, it's a simple message. These are usually the ones who opt for structured student housing. The shorter distance, then the more likely it is that the students can arrange something else. So let's move from the country level to the city level. And we will have 5 slides on this. So what are the champion cities by various KPIs or various factors? So we made 5 different viewpoints. So what are the champion cities by number of international students in Europe? And these are the top 25, so it's a cut from the 50 cities that we measure, top 25 cities by number of international students. And as you can see that there is no surprise in number 1 and number 2, but there are some surprises in later positions, especially to see number of international students in predominantly mostly in continental Europe rather than in the UK. Then champion cities by number of purpose-built student accommodation establishments. Establishment means every single building, so is measured separately. So if there are 7 buildings in one campus for student housing, there are 7 establishments in this database. So we measure over 3,400 PBSAs in the UK and Europe. Every single one we visited and measured, so that we have a detailed hands-on and roughly 40 KPIs about each of them. And thanks to this, we were able to make a detailed database of all the PBSAs, be it public, private, religious, all kinds of PBSAs in Europe, so that we have a total supply and we could make decisions out of the total pool. So as we can see that Istanbul and Maastricht come on top, it's because they have many small residences, whereas some other cities come on lower positions because they have bigger PBSA establishment, or the supply is low. So standardly our clients are surprised by cities like Turin or Lyon or Milan, that they are in a different positions that they expected. What is even more important are the champion cities by number of PBSA beds. Again, this is a cross portfolio, so public, private, religious. And this is a different picture. So yes, Istanbul stays on the number 1, but Prague is suddenly on top. So in a way, the supply is really high, with relatively limited demand from international students, but really high demand from domestic students. And the order is rather different, as you can compare it to a number of establishments. So these 2 slides gives you a better idea what city is how beneficial for your particular objectives. And this is probably the most important one. It's a supply-demand dynamics. We have 2 slides, total supply demand and private supply demand. Let me explain. So these are the champion cities in Europe. When we compared the total number of international and domestic students versus number of beds being available for them to be accommodated. So you see, I translated the numbers to some analysis. So Rome is the most undersupplied. So only 2% beds for the overall number of students in Rome. On the other hand, Prague is the best supplied, so 28% beds for all the students in Prague, be national or international. And this gives a different picture on your investment decisions, whether you want to face the overall supply, demand, and dynamics in particular city. Obviously, there are many other factors that might be considered, especially how many ranked universities are there, what are the other demand generators, what is the pipeline, what are the overall plans of the city to bring more students there. but this basic metrics, supply, demand, and dynamics may help at the very beginning. This is the private supply versus international students' demand dynamics. Means that how many beds in a private PBSA segments are versus international students only. And as you can see, Amsterdam comes really high. So it's basically oversupplied, or the most supplied, so 71% beds for all the international students there. So the operators need to be dependent on domestic students as well. On the other hand, the cities like Warsaw, Vienna, Oslo, Munich represent, from this point of view, the best opportunity, so they are undersupplied in private PBSA segment. So this is second to last slide, champion cities based on accommodation cost. So we measured the benchmark product studio per month per person. We did it all together with Bofans, which you will hear of soon. It's in Q1 2016, so it's 1 year old. But this is basically the average price in particular cities, and you see that London and Dublin come on top two, followed by Manchester and Barcelona. Paris is surprisingly not that high, etc. It goes to some university hubs, so smaller cities that we measure that are relatively higher price that was expected. So from the country level and the city level, I moved to very last slide, what are the other KPIs to determine the investment. So what we usually have to request for is first and foremost the pipeline. So what is the other what are the other PBSAs to be built, which we measure thanks to information from various sources that we get, and what other universities are about to be built. Then overall growth rates, summer demand, as we have many hybrid models, or increasingly more so, that it's not only for students during those 10 months, but also for young professionals, micro-living, and tourism beds, usage for the tourism beds in summer. So what is the overall summer demand needs to be measured for those 2 months. Then overall regulations, followed by price levels, and then the overall distribution and student preferences. We had a little chat in the very morning today that sort of the demands of the investors are more and more sophisticated, and then 2-3 years ago we had only demands for basics, but now before investment, investor wants to know everything, including what are the customer preferences, the structure of room, kitchen in and out, kitchenette, etc., the premises, what it should be like. And for example, just recently we learned that 40 in one city that we measured, 41.5% customer preferences, student preferences were about the premises, so outside of their own room, but only 5.6% cared about what's in the room. So we changes the dynamic how the building will look like. And then it's there is also distribution, which we prepared sort of okay. So interactive map. This is Milan. So basically, we convert all the data to interactive featuring, so that one can see the overall overview. So for example, Milan, you can see the red and blue, which are the demand generators, so the universities and colleges, and the blue ones are the PBSAs. Obviously, I can switch on, for example, universities and do the summer schools, and now I see the distribution of the PBSA supply against the summer schools and summer generators, or I can see the neighboring asset classes like 3-star hotels in the city, so the competing asset class, or trade fairs for commercial business sector. So this way, if I want to build in some kind of district in Milan, I can see the very details of particular district in Milan or any other of the 50 cities in Europe. So